the start of the season, I think a lot of people in the game really feared for Brentford. Lost a brilliant manager in Thomas Frank, brought in Keith Andrews, who obviously was new to management, knew the club well. But I think what worried people was when they saw the fixture list and they saw the home games that they had. And this, again, being another one of them. Now, in the first 6 home games they've had under Keith Andrews, they've played 5 of last season's top 6. And the other game is against Manchester United, you know, a huge show, one of the biggest clubs in the world. And the results and performances in those games have been absolutely fantastic. And it's always been tough for any team going to Brentford, even going back, as I said, under Thomas Frank. But the results and the performances, I don't think we've probably seen that before against this calibre of opposition, certainly at home.
And out of those teams that played, it was only Manchester City that was a disappointing game for them, as you say. So, it's all about the long throws, isn't it?
Yes.
But because they do them so well, and it's how Newcastle dealt with them today.
Yeah, but what Brentford have got, we're talking about the long throws a lot this season, but Brentford have got the best player with a long throw in Coyote, and he's the right back. He goes over to the left to take them. So we asked Eddie Howe about this before the game, and I just want to look at the little tactic he set up. And Nick Pope, we know, is probably one of the biggest goalkeepers in the Premier League. So is the tactic from Eddie Howe and the goalkeeper was to have his goalkeeper not play as a goalkeeper, almost help his defenders to come and head it. So he's almost like an outfield player who can use his hands. Yeah. He's not on the goal line. He's not protecting the goal. So it was really interesting how he went about it. But Nick Pope had real problems with it all day. So this is the first one. This is from the left side. So we look at his position. We can see he's not in the goal and he misjudges it. He gets the flight of the ball wrong. But what he does do well is he realises that and then he drops back into the goal. So initially, he misreads the flight of the ball, but gets himself in a decent position and Newcastle handle it well. Again, we look at this situation now, and he's not even the goalkeeper as such now. There's actually a defender behind him who's actually on the goal line with one of the Brentford players. So again, you can see this tactic and what they've worked on, that they want Nick Pope, as well as the big defenders, to come for the first ball. This time, he does come for it, and he just doesn't deal with that at all. He's all over the place. So he's misjudged the first one, got away with it, and he's got away with this one again because he hasn't handled it well. So now we go to the goal. Now again, you look at the position that he finds himself in. He's right off the line, we can see that. And again, he makes a mess of this one. Now, as that ball's coming in now, if you go back to the first throw-in, and I said he misjudged it, but the great thing that he did was he realised that and then got back onto the goal line. I think he's got to realise now, especially with the forward backing into him, I'm not going to make that. You've got to get out of there. Get yourself out of there and get back onto that line. He just ends up in no man's land. He's miles out of his goal area. It was a tactic they wanted to use for the long throws. They were lucky on 2 occasions and then come a cropper there. And it was just really interesting at the end. I know there was maybe a little bit of an injury there. Ramsdale comes on for the penalty later on. Now, Ramsdale is a goalkeeper who's played for Arsenal. He's played for England. He's almost too good to be a second-choice goalkeeper. In some ways, that's a real battle. And I think at some stage, Ramsdale was always going to get the nod. I wouldn't be surprised if Ramsdale is in goal for the next Newcastle game. Yeah, I think Nick Pope's a really good goalkeeper, but at times he finds it tough in certain situations, especially with the ball at his feet. And I think it might be time now to give Ramsdale a run.
And they've got an international break to think about that decision. Dan Burn was at left-back. Both the sort of penalty incidents involved him, one given, one not given. Your thoughts?
I actually thought they were both penalties, and I think Newcastle got away with the first one, and I think Dan Burn thinks they're both penalties because you can just see by his reaction. I mean, there isn't a lot of contact. The VAR said minimal contact, but you see Dan Burn's reaction. Normally, if you feel an attacking player's dived, you're on top of him, you're screaming at him, but you see the contact there on the boot. But the problem with Dan Burn playing at left-back is, at times he can't move his feet because he's so tall, and they're the problems you would have as a centre-back going to left-back. So, can't move his feet quick enough, gets away with giving a penalty. The same 2 players are involved, and again, one of the problems having Dan Burn at left back would be his lack of pace. and there. So they're the two problems. Moving your feet quickly enough and the lack of pace, as we've mentioned. But he does a brilliant job for them at left-back. And in some ways, you'd want him at left-back in this game because of set pieces. But with Carra is a flying machine, and Brentford got what they deserved in terms of penalties.
I mean, that's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, given the physicality of Brentford, given their set pieces, you are going to want someone of the size of Dan Burn in your team.
You are in a specific game like that. I think what's interesting with Dan Burn is he's now in the England squad as well. Thomas Tuchel, feels really highly about him, but he's been brilliant for Eddie Howe, especially at centre-back. Eddie Howe's just got the problem now of Botman's come back. He was a really good player, and he's a left-footed centre-back. You never see two left-footed centre-backs play together. So you're almost getting Dan Burn in the team a little bit, while Lewis Hall's come on back. But again, that might be an area that Eddie Howe has to look at after the international break.
They were ahead at half-time. They've ended up losing away again. They've had a good start in the Champions League, had a good win at home during the week in the Champions League. We're 4 years now into Eddie Howe's reign. Where are the club rather than where is he? Or maybe where is he as well?
Well, listen, he's going to go down whenever he moves on for the club as one of the greatest Newcastle managers. I mean, you look at what he did when they were bottom of the table. He came in that first season, stabilises things. Then his second season to get Champions League football was out of this world. League Cup final against United. The next season, another really good season. Finished seventh. The goals they've scored there. Exciting team on the front foot. And then what we saw last season, winning the League Cup. And listen, I was devastated that day.
You were.
But the scenes that day and what the Newcastle fans and what he gave them that day, and Champions League football again. And you've mentioned what they're doing in the Champions League this season. I've championed Eddie Howe as the next England manager. I think he's a wonderful coach, the best English coach by a million miles. I love him to bits. But now that we're 4 years in, I don't think Eddie Howe can do any more than what he's done at Newcastle. He's won a trophy. He's got Champions League football. I don't see Newcastle winning a Premier League. So I'm not sure there's much more he can do. And that's not just talking on the back of Newcastle being, a couple of points outside the relegation zone or sort of questioning the manager in any way. But I think Newcastle have let him down. I do. I mean, the topsy-turvy sort of nature of the club in terms of sporting directors, other people behind the scenes. It almost feels at times like he's there on his own. The coaching, transfers, as I said, he's had problems with sporting directors, people at the top of the club. The big Saudi investment, it hasn't really kicked on. Now, they could question the PSR, the rules, I get all that. But something to me, when I look at how he had to handle the summer, the Isaac situation, getting players in late, the Wissa situation now, it's been a mess at Newcastle, really. And I think when you're talking about one of the greatest managers they've ever had in their history, I think he deserves better. And if I'm thinking how Eddie Howe's thinking, if that England job came up in the summer after the World Cup, we know Tuchel's contract situation, I'd be there in a shot. Because, as I said, I think he's been let down, and I don't think he can take Newcastle any further in what he's done so far.
If things were to start to change off the field, and they do now have a new chief executive who came in September, and Ross Wilson from Nottingham Forest to be this sporting director, how the investment works going forward will depend on what Premier League rules are, sustainability, Champions League rules, etc. If some of the structural things were to change, could he do more then? Or are you saying that that's just not part? So I look at Mikel Arteta, but Arsenal have had that structure behind for...
It's not just structure. Arsenal are a bigger club than Newcastle. Newcastle, what Eddie Howe's done and getting Champions League football is absolutely fantastic. And they're a huge football club. But the history isn't there in terms of winning things or maybe bringing money in from the outside like, Liverpool or Manchester United and Arsenal do. Notoriously, they're probably the three biggest clubs in this country. So they've got that history behind them where they can bring money in from sponsorship or fans around the world. Newcastle don't have that. So it's always going to be difficult for them. They lose the best player in the summer.
Yeah.
So if I'm Eddie Howe, he's built this team, he's brought a lot of these players in and made them great players, and then they're getting sold. Who could be the next one that gets sold maybe in the future?
Is that because some of those players will go, well, if Isak's gone, then, what message does that send us out to a squad? Maybe I should start looking out.
But what else can they do? The only next step for Newcastle would be to win the league. That's it. They've got Champions League football. They've won a trophy. The next thing would be to challenge for a league title. They thought that might happen in a few years ago when the ownership comes in, but I just look at Eddie Howe now. They're 4 years in, looking at him at the end of the game, and thinking, you know, even if they turn it around the second half of the season, and they're great second half of the season, and they finish 7th, it'll still feel, yeah, but we've got Champions League, we won a trophy, you know, for me. So, yeah, I think he's been let down, and I think if I was Eddie Howe, I'd probably be looking sort of, you know, if the England job came, I would be looking at a situation like that, yeah.